Okay, we are live. I'll just wait a couple of minutes. Yeah, people are popping in. Just waiting. I'll just wait. Hi guys, I see there's a few that have joined straight away. I'll just give it a minute or two. Yeah, as people are still filtering in, but I hope everyone's okay for the UK-based people. I hope you've enjoyed the rare bit of sunshine that we've had today. We've had a beach day, which is great. We've got to make the most of it. Alex is joining us from America, but Alex, I'm sure you know all about the stereotypical English weather. So even now in early spring, when you get a nice day, you have to get out. It's just kind of like a rule. Where are you, Alex, in the US?
I'm in Oklahoma, so I'm kind of right in the very middle. If you don't know where Oklahoma is, I'm just north of Texas.
Sounds like it's pretty warm.
Everybody at least knows where Texas is, so
Yeah. Yeah, sounds like you probably have a lot more sunny days than what we get throughout the year.
probably.
Yeah. It's not hard, to be fair.
No.
No. Right. Well, I think there's quite a few people here, so I'll get started. So, yeah, good evening or good afternoon if you're in America. And thanks for joining us. I am so excited about this event. It's obviously it's International Donor Conception Awareness Day. It's quite a mouthful. But what we're doing here, this is special. This is powerful. I've never seen anything like this before. And it's a great honor that firstly, we're able to put this on and draw people to come and see it, but also to have you guys here with us. So thank you all for joining us. This is going to be good. So yeah, it's as anyone who's seen the kind of like the posts and the advertising that I put out about it it's everyone here, and I'll get everyone to kind of give a broad oversight of their journey, so to speak, and what's brought them to be here now today in a minute. But we are all sperm donor recipient fathers, and I know each and every one of these guys, Alex, Marc, and David, and it's an honor to know each of them because they all talk about their journey and yeah, this is what we all need is guys like us sharing our stories to empower other people who are going through it, or like we're still going through it, even though we have the donor conceived children, we're always going to be living with it. So without further ado, let's get a broad and a brief overall kind of introduction of who we have here. So Marc, would you want to go first?
Sure. So it's really a privilege to have been asked to be involved in something like this when we were going through the traumatic elements of our journey. Kind of a male contingent or support network did not exist in the slightest. So it's great to be a part of this. Trying to condense into not very much time. So in total, our kind of journey through infertility was probably about 4.5 years or so. We tried for a year, had a feeling that tried naturally for a year, had a feeling that something was wrong. It was COVID, everything was shutting down. We paid to go and see a private fertility specialist who ran extensive testing on my wife. I was kind of tested as an afterthought. They thought kind of might as well test the husband too. Got a phone call saying that there was a problem with the test. Jumping over a few bits, we went to see a urologist who turned out to be Pippa Sandster, who recently appeared on a separate thing. I got tested for a whole bunch of tests by her, and it turned out I had Klinefelter syndrome, and that was kind of the root of my infertility. Should I stop there for the moment because we're kind of talking about how we got diagnosed?
Or... Yeah, I think we'll definitely go into it in more depth. So yeah, thank you, Marc, for that. And Alex.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Alex. I guess, the start of my story, my wife and I might sound a lot like David's, spoiler alert, but wife and I have been together since high school, and since really young, and got married young. Kind of thought we would. We were the first people to get married in our friend group, so we thought, we'll wait a while to have kids. And then a bunch of our friends started having kids, and we were like, all right, it's time. We're ready. Done a bit of traveling, those kinds of things. So started trying, and about a year went by with nothing. And so ended up starting to get some testing done, and found out that the issue was on my end with an azoospermia, or zero sperm diagnosis. And so lots of decisions and hard days between then and today. But now sitting here with our 5-year-old daughter Delaney, could not be happier to be where we ended up, despite lots of those hard days in between.
I hear that, and looking forward to exploring more about those hard days. And David, good evening, and thanks for joining us.
Hello. To be honest, I can pretty much just say what Alex said, to the point where we have children that have got the same name. So my Delaney's 4 years old, and it wasn't until she was born, I believe, that someone said, you should go and check out this person's Instagram, who was Alex's Instagram. And it was like reading our own story back. So my wife and I met in high school. We got married 12 years later. We're very linear people. We found out that we did the whole, went to high school, went to university, bought a house. It was like one thing after the other. And obviously after getting married, it was kids. We talked about having kids for years, and like since we were together from high school. And yeah, it just didn't happen for us for whatever reason. I got a diagnosis of azoospermia, and yeah, the rest is kind of like, we've now got a 4-year-old through sperm donation called Delaney. So yeah, what Alex said, pretty much.
And do you know what? I'm like, this is about you guys, but just in case I do chip in, I will briefly introduce myself, but also I could virtually copy and paste those two anyway as well. Not quite the high school sweetheart story, but my wife and I have been together for quite a long time. But yeah, it's that, you touched upon it, David. It's that thing of like, you just do what you think is the path in life, and it's like you tick them off. Okay, great, done that. Let's have a family. And it's like, what? Like, sorry, what? This is not happening. This isn't going to plan. So yeah, it's we follow that a very similar path and story. And yeah, after being diagnosed with azoospermia, I went on to have a couple of operations to try and rectify that: a varicocele embolization and a microteasy, neither of which yielded any positive results. And we went down the path of using donor sperm, and we now have 4-year-old twins, which I've never looked back. And like Alex said, it's a lot, you go through a lot of pain, but I wouldn't change it for anything now. And that's something that I think is a really important message, and it will come up all the way through this. So yeah, it's I think that comment about us saying, like, we can copy and paste a story, that's going to be so similar for many men. And that's a key message to get across as well, is that what you're feeling, you're definitely not alone. It's not even about what you're going through. It's the emotions, it's the emotions and how you feel. So yeah, this is why I'm so proud to be able to do this. And that, I guess without further ado, let's get to the crux of it, of that. As men, what did it feel like when you got that diagnosis and were told, like, in however way you were told, in whatever language, about being infertile, about having no sperm? And it probably might be a stage to that. It's like, when you get the initial diagnosis, then the kind of final door being closed may be a year or two down the line. But if you could go back to those kind of those early days, David, as to how that felt when you received the initial diagnosis.
I can remember all the time when we had no idea whether it was an issue with me or whether there was an issue at all, or whether we were just unlucky or anything, always having doctors, any specialists saying, oh, it'll be all right, and kind of almost like passing it off like like it'll just get solved. It'll be fine. We'll find out what it is and we'll fix it, and then you'll be totally fine and just go on with your daily life. And the more and more it didn't happen, the more kind of disillusioned I got. And it almost got to a point where it was the micro TC, funnily enough, that when we knew we were going to get a no, there's nothing there before it happened. Really, it was more like just to tick it off a list to make sure that we'd covered all angles, basically. But I remember kind of feeling a bit of relief that, because I think if they'd have said, "Oh no, there is sperm there," it would have been like a whole other process starting again, and that was almost more scary than the relief of just going, oh, "Okay, cool, that's now definitive." And I think that was the problem. Well, not the problem. That was the thing, that we'd just gone through so many different like battles and all of that sort of stuff, even to get to that point, that the overall feeling when it happened was kind of a bit of a relief. And I'm now in a position, say 4 years after having a child, or 4.5 years after having a child, I'm now in a position where I'm kind of looking for therapy, not for just to kind of unpack it all. Because I think what I did when I found out that that I had no sperm, essentially was kind of just went, okay, well, what's next? And that was our kind of mantra through the whole thing. Well, what's next? So whether it was good news, bad news, it was just, what do we do next? And it became really evident for us that a family was far more important than a baby. And that was it. So I kind of just parked my infertility emotions to one side, put a pin in that, and almost didn't forget about it, but kind of just went, right, I'll deal with that later. And I think only now I'm starting to kind of realize that I need to unpick all of that again, which is actually really healthy for me. But up until that point, it was just like we were talking about it earlier, and it's kind of almost like a blur in a way. Like there's so much of it that Ellie, my wife, can almost like photographic memory recount. And I'm like, I don't even know if I was in the room at that point, when I obviously was, but you just kind of deal with it and kind of get on with it. I'm just rambling.
No, mate, that's incredible. I don't want to stop you. It's and yeah, thank you for sharing that you're going through that process now, because I think that is a key point for anyone to hear, is that it's really hard, but it's something that will always be a part of you no matter what, and it's about how you make space for it in your life and deal with it when that can whether it's at the time, or I think what you mentioned about what's next, that is such a very typical, and it's not a bad thing, absolutely not, but it's a very typical male way to deal with stuff. It's about like kind of, okay, right, looking at this, I can't fix that, what's the next option? And it's about, I think we like that, don't we? We like having a direction, and if there's a fork in the road coming up, okay, what's option A, what's option B? We'll take which one it comes to when we need to. So yeah, I can hear a lot of that and resonate with it. So Alex, how did that sound to you? Is it something that resonates with you and reminds you of what you went through?
Yeah, I think I did grieve it a lot right away. I was probably a little bit different in that way, where I can remember, like, my wife and I happened to be together when we got the call, and we had both been having some testing done, and I had to run inside to a meeting. She waited in the parking lot, and I got back in the car, and she was crying, and she was on the phone. And the first thing I said was, "What's wrong with me?" I just knew immediately that like something, I don't know what it was. I just knew. And so I think that's kind of how that phrase, like, I hate it now. I hate the whose fault is it, type of attitude around infertility. But that's how I felt for a long time, was that something was wrong with me. And so, dealt with a lot of the kind of, it started out as disbelief and shock, and then kind of into shame and embarrassment. Felt emasculated, really. Feel like I kind of was going to become, the punchline of a emasculation joke, or whatever. It's kind of just how I felt for a long time. And so I felt like I really had to work through all of that before I would I think my wife was ready to move on through treatment. Same as you said, Sean. I had the varicocele procedure as well, and kind of just I felt like I had to go through some of those things, but then also really to process. And I think Lauren was ready long before I was to move on, and I just felt all those feelings. I couldn't. I think some guys feel like they have to kind of tuck them away. I think that's very normal. I think what I felt was that I had to almost overcome them first, because I really worried about kind of projecting all of those onto, this kid that we were hoping to have. And so I think I probably, not to say I haven't internalized certain things for the last, 8 years now. I'm sure that I have. But I do think I did probably wade through them quite a bit at the very beginning too.
Yeah. It's, that certainly resonated with the that aspect and fearing that I was going to become the butt of jokes. When I was going through this, I worked in a very male-dominated office, and it was kind of like dog eat dog with banter, and that's kind of what kept me silent for so long. Actually, it was fearing that it was going to be the butt of the jokes, but fortunately it never happened. And often I think we do play out those fears worse than what the reality is, but that's the complex nature of this, I guess, and what we go through. So Marc, like, at what point throughout your trying to conceive journey was it that you got diagnosed with Klinefelter's, and how did that come about, and how did it make you feel?
I mean, listening to the other two, even though I'm not in it anymore, it shocks me how much I forget how similar these journeys are. Like I relate to so many aspects of what David and Alex have just said, and yourself as well. I guess on my side, so Klinefelter's is about having a low testosterone level. So I was, or that's one of the things. So when I saw Pippa, and she recommended that I have for microtease, she put me on Clomid, which is an oral medication that has a lot of success in lots of men. It didn't agree with me. My testosterone plummeted. I then had HCG injections, which I kind of started with a fear of injections. So I now don't have a fear of injections. So that's good. And then had the microtease. I mean, my microtease was technically successful. They found sperm. It wasn't usable for IVF. That was kind of like a double whammy. I kind of would prefer to have had them say, "Oh, there was nothing," but even so, I still had the diagnosis of azoospermia. It was crippling. I mean, looking back at our, I will keep using the J word. Looking back at our journey, I just remember it was a feeling of the carpet being swept from beneath my feet again and again and again, followed by limbo, followed by again. And how did it feel emotionally? It was, I lost hope. I lost my sense of self. I lost, like, I didn't know how to talk to family or friends or sometimes even my wife about it, because I felt like I had caused everything we were going through. It's worth I mean, I guess it's worth noting that I now don't feel like any of those things, in part because of our son, who I didn't say at the start is about to turn 2, and I won't go into that because that's a topic coming up. But yeah, like there was so much trauma, and I fell to such a low place. I used therapy to help myself get out of that. So similar to what the other guy said, it felt really important to me to not project what I was going through or the feelings that I was having onto future families. So I kind of took myself into therapy for that reason. And then that led to, oh, I've lost all sense of hope and anything happening for a reason and sense of self. So I then worked through that in therapy as well, to then end up where I am now.
Yeah, mate, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And that certainly what you and Alex both said about doing the work there and then, to not have to project onto a child, hopefully in the future. That's a really key point. And Alex, I remember something you said a while back, where become a donor recipient parent in any respect, it's not like a band-aid to heal your infertility. It won't heal that. So it's important to come to that full acceptance, I think, before you then start going down that road. Because if you're just trying to kick the can down the road, so to speak, and just be like, oh yeah, like, let's just, it'll be fine. There's always reminders, and this is something that we're going to come on to as we're all there living it. There's always a reminder every day, and it is important to know that it doesn't just go away. Marc, you mentioned that identity piece. I'm wondering how you dealt with that specifically when it came to the loss of genetics, and in terms of then looking at the donor sperm route, like where did that identity come to that? How did you reform that?
So I guess starting with the feeling of loss of self, I think came from it was kind of like, okay, what is my purpose, or that sort of thing. I was also dealing with what does Klinefelters mean. I've always felt different. Now I have a reason that supports me being different. So imposter syndrome was going crazy as well. I guess the parts of therapy that really helped with that were helping me to redefine what my values were and drives and what I wanted out of life, given that I wasn't able to pass on my genetics to my children. And also a lot of work on nature versus nurture. I now have absolutely no doubt that nurture is most of what goes into bringing up a child. Someone said to me the other day that my son has my smile, for instance, and it was honestly, it was like the nicest thing. But anyway, that's a tangent. Can I double check what the original question was so I don't go too far off piste?
No, it's fine. It's just about the losing one sense of identity and then rebuilding it, and kind of addressing how you're going to proceed by becoming a donor recipient father around that sense of self.
Sure. I think the main thing for me was that I really wanted my wife to experience being pregnant, regardless of whether it was my sperm or someone else's or etc. I'd say we probably started looking at donors before I was strictly ready to do so. It was while I was recovering from the micro T's and still waddling around the house and not really liking stairs. I mean, I can go into how we decided to do that, but I guess I hope that this has in some way answered the question. I think that I kind of decided to have faith in the fact that by my wife and I making a joint decision on a donor that we had done a lot of research on the clinics, on etc., that therefore that would just be the most appropriate or similar set of genetics to either to me or to what we were looking for based on. I mean, originally I thought that we would be looking at kind of height and eye color and hair color, but in the end we focused on personality traits of the donor and that sort of thing. But I'm not sure I'm quite answering the question, but hopefully something in that does answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And sorry if my ding just came through on the recording there. Alex, how did that identity piece work for you? And like when you were kind of dealing with that massive hit to your ego and your sense of what it was to be a man, and then moving forward, like kind of considering a donor, how did you join those dots?
Yeah, I think a lot like you said, kind of your environment matters, and how, we've probably all been a part of different, rooms of guys over, the course of our lives, whether it's a locker room or a break room at work or just a group of friends or whatever it is. And, you kind of hear the jokes or whatever. And so I think that's, like I said earlier, I went straight to, something's wrong with me. I'm, kind of my job in this marriage is to provide this piece for us to have a child, and I can't do that. And so it was a big hit to me. I've always I grew up kind of playing sports and those kinds of things, and so just in, like I said, lots of those locker room conversations and things like that. Like and even prior to my diagnosis, to be honest, I probably could have easily been a part of the problem with those kinds of things too, and just ignorance and misunderstanding. But then to know, that I am in that category was really hard for me, and frankly still can be. I, now, to fast forward to where we are now, feel like my identity has changed so much. How I view myself has changed so much over the last 8 years. And now I think, honestly, I try to look at myself, when I think in this context, I try to look at myself the way that my daughter, looks at me, which just is dad. And so I think, even though I had lots of low points in opinion of myself, or my, worrying what others' opinions of me might be or something along the way, I think I've kind of, there's a big part of having our daughter that has kind of healed that in me too, because we talk with her about what happened, and what all we went through to get to her. And I know she's only 5 years old. She doesn't fully understand, obviously, and won't for some time, but, nothing in the way that I tell that story to her, or I tell her what was wrong with me, changes the way that she looks at me at all. And so I think that to me is, part of how I try to, tried to kind of shift my own view of myself along the way too, just from, and I think what I try to tell myself too is that, I have tried to do everything along the way from the very beginning to kind of heal myself and heal, the broken parts of our marriage along the way. That was, where we were kind of grieving together. My wife was depressed. I was depressed. We've done all that work from that day, 8 years ago to now, to be kind of our best selves and the best parents that we can be. And so I think I try really hard to just focus my self-image in that direction now, which is that, I'm a dad, regardless of how I got to this point, and one that has always and will always try my best to do, what I think is best for my kid.
That's incredible. Thank you. To touch upon that yeah, it's like when you're looking at yourself in the third person, that third person being your child, is what do you want them to see, and how do I want to be remembered by them? And it's a great way to keep yourself present and keep checking, and it really keeps you accountable to your behaviours and your actions. It's a really great point. And David, how did you kind of go along that identity journey?
So a lot happened in my story that isn't necessarily directly related to fertility issues. So we got married in 2015, 2016, started trying naturally for a child and wasn't working. So went through the general process that I'm sure a lot of you know about. We got into the process and we're quite far in, having all the tests, doing all the normal stuff. And my mum had a brain aneurysm and she had 10 hours of brain surgery and came out the other end a completely different person, but was in hospital for 4 months, practically not knowing what was going on. 2 weeks after she went into hospital, my dad went into hospital, had a heart attack and died. So we then buried my dad without my mum knowing, and there was loads of all the stuff going on about that. But the reason that I bring that up is that in that time I became a dad, and it was really strange. Now, I'm not the sort of person, don't get me wrong, I'd have my mum and dad back tomorrow in a fully fit capacity if there was a choice. But I learned so much about responsibility that I didn't know before. And it really, because I knew before all of this happened, I obviously knew that I was going through this donor journey and stuff like that. And I was just, it almost just put the infertility on a back burner again. And I think it's where I think I would have dealt with it there and then if it wasn't the fact that all this stuff happened and I felt like I just needed to push some of it aside. But I look back now I'm in a position where I absolutely dote on my daughter and she is absolutely incredible. Not that there was ever going to be any doubt of that in terms of how I feel about her, but I now look back at it and think that if we'd have just had a child naturally, like in the first year, I had struggled with my mental health for a long time before any of this, with eating disorders and depressive episodes and stuff like that. And I think I would have been an awful dad. And I'd like to say I'm not the sort of person that is like, and everything happens for a reason sort of thing. But that 5 years of fertility journey made me so much stronger because it had to. I didn't have a choice to get stronger because I'm not the sort of person, or wasn't the sort of person, that would push myself into becoming a stronger person. I didn't have the self-belief that I could do it. But when you get thrown all of these obstacles because like the amount of people that would say, I remember sitting watching DIY SOS with someone and someone laughing, and it was when all the stuff that my mum and dad was having, and someone laughing and saying, God, you're almost got a story that's worthy of this now. And it was, you laugh, but at the same time you kind of break inside because it's true. And there was no option. There was no giving up option, unless it was a decision that was made by both of us that we didn't want to go down X or Y route. We just were like, no, like we're just doing it. There is no other option. We are having this family. And it doesn't matter what route we take. And if a road was cut off, we'd just go down the other road. And I think all of that stuff happening kind of really shaped me and helped me in a lot of ways, even though, like I say, I would much rather it didn't happen because it was horrific. But it really did shape me into being the sort of person that I needed to be a great dad for Dell. And I think that I am that now. And if you'd have asked if this had been 9 years ago, it would have been now, I would never have been able to say that I was a great dad, and now I can. So I think I kind of came to the realization of that the journey was really bloody hard and traumatic, and I'm still dealing with it and processing it, but I'm dealing with it as separate things. That the loss of genetics, and I lost kind of all in that 5 years, all semblance of fatherhood in my life, because my dad is I haven't got granddads. I lost my dad, and I lost my own ability to be a father in the biological sense. That was all I knew at the time. So it was horrible, and I'm still getting over it, don't get me wrong. But I do really think that all of these hurdles that we overcame turned me into the great father that I am now. And that's kind of the way that I approach it, to be able to kind of stay strong in every respect. Like life and fatherhood and everything.
Yeah, mate. Well, it's not the first time I've heard your story, and every time I hear it, it blows me away. Like, thank you for sharing it. And I can also completely vouch, like, having seen you in real life, like, you are a tremendous father, and yeah, everything you're saying there is like quite honestly very true. So, but yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's very understandable that you had to park some things to give mental space for other things going through all that at the same time. And a lot of what you said rang true about it changes you, and it doesn't mean for the worse. Just to keep on topic, I won't delve too much into it, but I'm going through some like big life challenges at the moment. But had it not been for what I learned about myself and the resilience I went through with the infertility, I think this would have probably crushed me right now. But it's that first kind of thing that really, yeah, like we said, you have to take that good look at yourself and ask those tough questions like, who am I, and who am I as a father? Who am I as a man, and what will make me a good father? And I think we'll all agree that that isn't genetics, because we're all there. But on that bit, was there what was the tipping point for you guys to decide that you were willing to go down the donor route? And I'll go to Alex first on that one.
Yeah, I think it was Marc that said that he just wanted, his wife wanted to be pregnant, and he wanted that for her. And that was our case, all along too. I think we definitely had to grieve the loss of the kid that we couldn't have, the one that we thought we would have, together for the first, 10 years of our relationship, leading up to that point. And that was a hard thing to let go of. Similar to David, I lost my dad as well. And, I was his only son. And so there's this weird, I don't know, this weird pressure that I had that it's kind of, it's onto me to, pass down our line or our name or whatever. That probably in the end is insignificant, but it doesn't feel like it, and to a lot of people and in a lot of different, family units and cultures and things, it's incredibly significant and a huge part of your identity. And so that was really hard, for me, but also, my wife really grieved the loss of that kid too. And so we took a lot of time. We did some counseling, and we kind of interestingly, about the same time that we got my diagnosis, my younger sister announced that they were going to adopt. She and her husband were going to adopt. And so throughout kind of the bulk of our infertility journey, we watched the adoption process going on, and kind of the foster to adopt process. And so we now have a niece and nephew through my sister that are adopted. Those were the first kind of grandkids in my family, my mom's first grandkids. And so we got to see kind of how beautiful that whole process was. And as beautiful as it was, and of course how grateful, we are now to have my niece and nephew in our lives, I think it also really reaffirmed for us how important it was to have that experience of pregnancy and childbirth and newborn stages and things. We just, my wife and I just really talked about, like, okay, would you be okay when my niece and nephew were adopted? They were 3 and 4. And again, so grateful for that. It was such a beautiful process. And my sister never wanted babies. She didn't want to have a baby. She didn't want to be pregnant. She wanted toddlers and above. She didn't want to ever deal with diapers or, any of those things. And for her, it was the perfect scenario. And for us, it kind of reiterated, man, that would be really special. I would also be sad to miss, these phases. And so I want to at least try, if we can, to have that experience, for both of us. And so also, I'm a control freak, and my wife probably kind of is too, but I'll let her be the one to say that officially. But I think we both just knew that we wanted, kind of, we hadn't been able to control anything throughout this whole process. And so we wanted to be able to control exactly how this part of it went for us. And so we wanted to, we're going to be the ones to decide what you're, eating while you're pregnant. We're going to be the ones to decide what our baby is exposed to when they're born. We're, and how they're raised from day one. And so I think for us, it also was just kind of holding on to a little bit of that control, getting to, go and literally handpick the other 50% of the DNA that was going to be contributed to our kid too. I think it just allowed us a lot of control back when we felt like we had none. And we were really lucky too. I think Marc said at the beginning, this, 8 years ago, almost to the day, is when I got my diagnosis. And nothing like this existed. There were no Instagram, accounts sharing. There was no, panels. There was no International Donor Conception Awareness Day. There was no, any of that. And so we were, just kind of trying to walk into this darkness, and hope that, there was light on the other side somewhere, and hope that this was okay. And we were very, very fortunate to find a couple of people in our lives that had gone through this exact same thing and had donor conceived kids at the time. And so, they, for us, became this really big, like this beacon, that we could kind of follow and see that life on the other side is going to be okay. Like it's scary because it's not a very, I don't feel like any of us probably grew up knowing a bunch of people that were donor conceived. It wasn't something talked about, infertility in general, not really talked about, let alone male factor and donor conception beyond that. And so it feels really weird when you're in it to think, what is this going to be like for us on the other side? But those people that we found kind of gave us a little bit of hope. And so all of those things along the way that we experienced, the grief, the therapy and the healing, the getting to see other avenues being pursued, getting to see other people pursue this path. I think every single one of those things along the way that we experienced kind of led us to the exact path that we chose at the exact time that we did. And, in the end, we just decided that that being parents was the most important thing and that we wanted to try it. We wanted to try to have that experience together. And so ended up deciding that that donor conception would be the path forward for us.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's all those little clues, really, some big clues, I just want to pick up on a couple of things you said, actually. You made a really important point that Lauren, your wife, was also grieving your loss of genetics because, all the chat here has been how did we deal with that? How did we think and feel? But actually, there's our partner next to us who's going through it with us, and because you meet them and you fall in love and you want to form a lifelong bond, and they see things in you that they would love to see in a child. And so, yeah, it's important to acknowledge that, of course, they feel it too. And also something which I thought is really great that you pointed out about that control element, but also, with raising a child, having a direct input on how you want to raise him. But I think that's the privilege. And that's, for me, that's been one of the biggest aspects of realizing that it's not about DNA. Is that you have this opportunity to really shape and mold and influence a human being from the outset, and they don't do what you tell them. They really don't. They do what they see, and that like I've said earlier, it keeps you accountable. It keeps you really on course of trying to be the best version of yourself because you have so much responsibility. But it's a privilege, and that really is not dependent on DNA. So when it comes to starting to make these choices. Marc, you touched upon earlier about when you started to play an active role in choosing a donor. How did you go about that, and what were you looking for?
So I, at the time, as I mentioned, I was still recovering from a microtease. I hadn't made it outside yet. Ice packs and painkillers all the way. I basically said to my wife, well, actually, let's slightly before that. So first of all, we were looking at the sperm bank. So we looked at UK based ones, EU based ones, America based ones, etc. We ended up going for a Danish sperm bank, which was called Selma Diaz at the time. I think it's now the Born Donor Bank or something like that. But basically, they the profiles on that particular website had a letter from the donor to the future child, baby photos of the donor, as well as the actual profile. I found it really hard not knowing very much about the donor, as I found from, I think it was the UK sperm bank. I've lost the names of I can't remember the names of them. So when we so basically I decided that I didn't want to see baby photos at the time. Still pretty sure that I don't want to see baby photos, because I have a visual brain, and if I see the baby photo, that's what I will see. Whereas that's just the element that I don't. That was something I noticed up myself. I basically said to my wife, have a look at this kind of set of listings. If you were going to date one of these men, let's make a short list of like the top 5 or 10 men on this listing that you would want to date. And then I'll get involved and we can talk through the profiles and try and go from there. So that's how we initially shortlisted, which I appreciate is probably a bit of a weird way of doing it, but that's what worked for us. And that basically meant that she looked at it from kind of a personality perspective, because I mean, as much as I'd love to think that my wife was drawn to my brawn and good looks, I'm sure it was also my personality. So that's kind of what we initially did. And then after that, I basically my wife read out snippets of the profiles, and I'd kind of get a sense as to whether it resonated or not. And eventually we whittled it down to kind of a top 2, and one of them was, it's so weird that this is a terminology that is associated, but one of them was out of stock. So that kind of made our decision for us, and we went for the other one. So that's kind of how we ended up with the particular donor that we did. I should say that we did do one of the filters was kind of like initially looking at kind of background and skin color and hair color and eye color, etc. We just realized further down the line that it was less important than some of the other traits. The letter that the donor had written to kind of future child mentioned that the donor had a donor conceived girlfriend at the time, for instance. So it just felt quite right. But I don't tend to go into as much detail as this when I get asked this question, because I think it's really important for people to make up their own minds of what is important to them. But given that we're on a panel about this particular topic, that's kind of the personal version answer to the question.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's what people will need to hear is the thought processes you went through. You mentioned having a short list, Alex. Pretty sure I heard you on a podcast years ago where I think your list was very complex and long and was on an Excel spreadsheet. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, it was. I've actually sent I kind of sometimes, like you said earlier, sometimes you kind of forget certain parts of it. And somebody a while back asked me if I still had that, and it was a good friend of ours who actually they have a very similar story to us, but it's on the other side. They are using donor egg. In fact, did and got pregnant after their second round of IVF using donor egg, and we got to go to their baby shower yesterday. Some of our very good friends, and she heard that same thing on a podcast, and she called me and she was like, send me your spreadsheet because I'm the same way, and I want to see, you know, all these things about all these people. So I cleared out all of the you know, the data within and just kind of sent the template because I'm just kind of that's how I needed to process all that information. So yeah, I had a big spreadsheet with like, what bank are they in? What's the donor number or donor name? What's the hair color, eye color, height, weight, you know, whatever, family medical history, what are their interests? And, you know, do they have, like, to Mark's point, like, do they have, you know, availability, or are they, you know, is there a wait list for this person or whatever it is? And so just so we could get the full, I think it got so overwhelming for me looking, we joined several different banks, kind of paid to where we could see the full catalogs here. I don't know how, you know, necessarily it works at the, like the UK based banks, but, in the States, that's kind of how it is. So you're paying to get to see, all the details on all the donors that they have. And so we joined, you know, several so that I could see all these things. I just felt like I needed to have all this information. But then once I did, it was so overwhelming. There were so, you know, just there's a million options, but kind of none at the same time. It feels like when, you know, when I first started looking, I was looking for this exact right, perfect. I almost had this little bit of excitement, like, it was a puzzle that I'm going to go solve and find this exact one right person that's meant to be, you know, the contributor to the other half of our kid's DNA. And then was so disappointed to go out there and go, like, I'm not in here. You know, I don't know what I expected, but I think my wife and I both started going through there kind of truthfully, almost looking for like a clone of me or something. And it just brought back up that grief of like, okay, we have to grieve that this is not going to be a 50% you, 50% me, you know, DNA mix. And so then we kind of had to reset and go, okay, like kind of to Mark's point earlier, like what is important to us? And it's going to be different for everybody. But, so I think that was a really good way for me to be able to just see all the information at one time in one place. And then to go, you know what, when I'm just looking at the information about who they are or listening to their interviews, about who they are and what's important to them in life, like those things became really important. We kind of shifted from, you know, similarly to what Marc was saying, we shifted, you know, the looks thing, was important to us. And, you know, we didn't want, I think we didn't want our family or our kid to feel any more different than maybe we already would. And so that kind of played a role for sure. But the deeper we got into it, it was like, okay, what is the most important thing to us? Is it going to be, you know, the health and family history, which it was, you know, do they seem like a decent person? And that was kind of twofold for me too. I want, you know, in the event that being a good and kind person is a genetic trait, for one, but then also because I know that there's this possibility, you know, that, you know, Delaney could wake up one day and say, I want to find this person. And so how will that person treat her, in that moment? And so we just, you know, again, we kind of tried to look at it all from this big, broad perspective, all at one time. But yeah, the short answer is yes, I did have a massive spreadsheet with probably hours of work put into it to try to get all this information out there on all these people. But it's just how I needed to process all that information to feel like we could make the best decision for us.
You're muted, Sean.
Sean, you're on mute. You're muted.
Classic. David, I'm wondering how that decision was formed for you. And also, I'm going to bolt on an additional question there because it may help answer a question that's come in. Did you use the NHS?
So I'll answer that one first. We started off at Bourne Hall. We were told to so we were sat in a local hospital to us, NHS hospital, saying that if there is an issue, what the options are, sort of thing. And the reply we got is that fertility is a complete postcode lottery, and that we were not in a good postcode for it. And the options they gave us were to either move house or go private, because moving house would have been cheaper, which I still remember to this day. However, we got, when they found out it was a male factor issue, then we were told that we'd have to go private anyway. However, we got a certain amount of the way through, and because we were going to use a sperm donor, we decided that, well, Ellie really decided that she wanted to donate some eggs as well. And so we had a load of tests, paid for the privilege of having all these tests, to find out that she's got a translocation in 2 of her chromosomes, which means that her eggs generally wouldn't necessarily be as wouldn't pass all the tests needed to become donor eggs, which meant that we then qualified for NHS treatment. So then moved on to be in, oh God, I've forgotten the name of the hospital. That's really bad. A hospital in London, anyway, that I'll remember in a minute. And for the rest of ours, which was great, as it was a lot of travel, because Bourne is in Cambridge and we're in Norwich, so it wasn't too far away. But going to London, God knows how many times, was a bit more work. But they were fantastic, and it meant we saved quite a lot of money, really. So we were already quite a lot of money in, because we paid for everything up to the micro tessie. So we were still already probably about 8 or 9 grand, maybe more than that in. But then luckily we got the rest on the NHS. In terms of sperm donor, funny enough, it made me laugh when Mark said that the way that you did it might be a weird way to do it. We pretty much did the same. I didn't want to spend the rest of my potential child at that point life looking for a donor in her. So for me, I wanted to know bits about personality, but I didn't want to know anything else. Didn't want to see photos, didn't want to hear voices, didn't want to do any of that sort of stuff. And strangely, and I don't know how this reflects on me, Ellie landed on 2 donors, one of which has a PhD in music composition, which is my background. Funnily enough, I was halfway through a PhD when a lot of stuff happened that meant that I left teaching in music, but in a slightly different area. And the other one who worked in hospitality, and which is what I do now. So it's a bit strange, really, because we kind of found someone that represented 2 parts of my life. However, it turned out that I was happy with both. And to me, there was one word that I was looking for, and it was passion. I'm a person that's passionate about passionate people, which is a mouthful to say. But I wanted someone that I felt had a true heart for something, whether it didn't matter what it was. Like the one that was in hospitality was also really passionate about circus skills, which again was something that I'd, in a darker part of my life, had got really into as a coping mechanism. So that kind of related to me. I was really passionate about it. And then the music PhD was so passionate about music, like you could hear it in the way that he was talking about it, and or that Ellie was telling me that he was talking about it. You'd hear it in the words that he was using. It was just such a passion thing for me that kind of felt right. And we couldn't really decide between either. I'd made a decision with the hospitality circus person, and found out that he had at the time refused to have a test that we needed to have because of Ellie's translocation. So then we used the other one, which was basically how it ended up being that way. But for me, from what I know of the donor, apart from the fact that looking back at it, this guy was really, really particular about music composition, and if you know classical music composition, you know it's a very strange art form that's got a lot of science and maths involved. He very much could read as being autistic, which Delaney now is. So there could have been something there. But apart from that, I don't really. She's Delaney. I don't even really think about it that much because she's got more traits of mine than she has of Ellie, let alone a donor. Just through nurture, really. Like we opened a coffee shop a month before having Delaney. And everyone that came into the coffee shop would always, and we weren't intentionally dressing her gender neutrally, it's just our style reflects that. The comment we'd get from practically everyone that came in is like, oh, doesn't he look like his dad? Which we used to really fight and be like, actually, she for one is donor conceived. And it got to the point where it was like, I don't need to tell Janet, who wants an Americano, that I'm going through donor conception. Like, she doesn't care, right? So it just ended up being like, yeah, she does, because she does, like, regardless of genes, she really does look like me. So yeah, just went with it.
And I think you've nicely segued into the next bit. Really, it's about life as a donor father, and it's interesting. Actually, I went through that same journey as when I was in a phase, and I think it's part of the process. Really, maybe it's like when people would make those resemblance comments, I would tell like strangers and stuff. Would be like, "Wow, actually, we went through IVF and the donor conceived, so we used donor sperm." And you kind of, especially like for older people, you see them like, "What?" And in the end, I just realised that like I didn't need to do that. I think it was I quite enjoyed doing it sometimes, just to get a reaction, make people feel awkward, just to also. Some people need to know that they can't just go and stick their face in a pram and make comments and invade your personal space as well. So it's a way of like kind of verbally making them recoil a little bit. But yeah, now it's just like you said, Janet doesn't need to know. So you just kind of go on and say thank you, yeah, nice one, and yeah, go about your day. But so David, I'll stay with you in terms of your fears that you might have had before becoming a father. Have they become true, or and how does kind of day-to-day play out as a donor recipient father?
To be honest, it's a really hard question to answer because Dell was born in 2020 in the middle of the global pandemic. Like I mentioned earlier, we opened a coffee shop also in that global pandemic. I lost my dad and lost my mother as she was then a year before the global pandemic. And coming out of that global pandemic, I was now a dad with a coffee shop and a completely different dynamic. So I don't know how it changed me. I don't know if it would have changed me in a different way if all the other stuff hadn't been there. It was kind of like a job lot almost. But I think so. We had quite a traumatic birth, and I think I just went into family first mode. I think that was what made it easier for me. It was that I was like, right, I've got to look after everyone then, because I was then the sole breadwinner because me and Ellie both were running the shop together, and also had Ellie, who was obviously not very well, and she'll happily say this. And also now her career is in the fertility industry, for want of a better word. I don't like the word industry when it's related to fertility, but she now works in fertility. So everything changed because of this child. Like we both changed careers because of this child, because of how stressful the IVF process was. Everything has changed. So I don't necessarily see that much of the negative of it, in total honesty. And I think the fact that I am so in love with that child kind of just overcomes everything. Like there's not one element of should I be worried about not being her dad and all of that sort of stuff. And I think the only thing that I feel really anxious about is something that, sadly, with an autism diagnosis, she might not even get to the point where she realizes that it's something that she can do. But I still don't want to look at photos. But I've said to Ellie that might change if she does. because we could do it together maybe. We ended up going with an American sperm bank. Not necessarily, we ended up not going with a UK sperm bank because what we wanted to happen before we knew that there'd be autism stuff, that we wanted the day that she said, "You're not my real dad, I'm going to find my real dad," to not be oh, he's down the road, brilliant sort of thing, that it had to be a little bit more complicated. So we thought the fact that she'd have to travel across water might actually make it a decision that she'd have to think about in a bigger capacity than it being a bit more of on a whim, because we just didn't want that. And it's not that I don't want her to know, it's more that I want her to know in the right way, and I want it to be a completely positive experience for her, rather than it being something that's born through negativity just because she's growing up or whatever the reason might be. And that still scares me a little bit, because it's the first time that I'll feel like I've got to go with something that I don't necessarily want to do, in as much as seeing who they are. But I think I'll be in a position where if it's for her, it's fine. But apart from that, it's been incredible. The one thing that I always say to people, though, is that the second that you have a child through sperm donation, is that your parenthood is exactly the same as anyone else's. So we always felt really guilty at the start when it was really difficult, being like, oh, but we worked so hard and wanted them so badly. And it's like, no, you can still have bad days. And I think that's something else that we've clung to really well as well, is that we can, with our parenting, is similar to anyone else's, regardless if the way that they got here doesn't necessarily change. But I walked in today and the excitement on her face to see me just makes every other worry kind of melt away for me. And that's kind of what I'm kind of clinging to. But I'm still, like I said, now I'm in a position where I'm truly happy with my family life. I'm now going back and exploring the whole infertility thing in a little bit more depth with my own mental health. And I think if you ask me again in a year, I might have a lot more answer to that, for example. So yeah, there's a bit of a to be continued with it as well, but it is something that I don't think will ever go away.
Well, there you go. April the 27th, 2026. We've just planned the event.
Good.
But David, I'm going to keep you talking for a little bit longer. Apologies, but you started answering a question that has come in this evening, so it feels natural to expand on it a bit more. And I'll come on to the other guys about the same soon. So you mentioned if Delaney would want to seek out the donor further down the line, and kind of how if you could explore a little bit more about your thoughts and feelings around that.
It excites and terrifies me in equal measure. And I think the fact that we've always talked about, so a lot of Delaney's autism is communication based. So she can say a million words, but conversation doesn't necessarily happen in the same way that it would normally. We still made a point of talking about her donor and everything from day dot. Like, it was never hidden from anyone. We had really stern conversations with Ellie's grandparents, who were the ones that, in complete innocence, would go, so the real dad, he's in America, right? And it's like, we'd never shout, get angry, but it's just correcting them. And we did all of that sort of stuff. But I wouldn't stop her for the world, because if that's what she wants, and if that's what makes her heart happy, and if it's what makes her feel complete, knowing all of this stuff, then it is really exciting. Like, it's that thing of, if I can take myself out of it and look at it from a kind of external perspective, I'd actually be really excited about the notion of her having this whole other genetic lineage in a completely different country that has, I don't know what percentage of her, but has an impact on the person that she is growing up to be. And I do find that really interesting. But there's the kind of the devil on my shoulder as well that's going, yeah, but you'll know what she should look like, you'll know what traits she gets from him now, and the fun of seeing your smile in her smile and stuff like that, and will disappear because you'll know too much, and he'll be better than you, and you'll start to think that he should be there instead of you, and all of that sort of stuff is still kind of there. And I don't think it'll ever go away. But the fact that I want her to be happy more than I want anything in the world would still not stop me from getting on a plane with her tomorrow and flying to wherever a donor is in the world and going and finding out who they are, assuming that they want to be, that part of their life in any sort of way. So yeah, I think it does play on me. It does play on my mind a lot, probably more than I let myself. I think I've got to be in this situation to kind of explore how I feel myself in a lot of ways, talking to other people. But it still won't change anything about what I let is not the right word, but what I would happily help her to explore in her life if that's the way that she decides to. And in the same respect, if she says not interested in the slightest, don't want anything to do with it, then that's it. I'm not going to look for it. Ellie's the same, even though she's more curious, she's exactly the same. She'd be like, well, no, if you don't want it, it's her story to tell. And I think that's something that I've always clung to. And if she wants to tell it, then I will happily be there to help her to do it.
Thank you. Thanks for being so open. Alex, to come to you with to go through the full process there, really is going to be a nice big open question for you. But what were your fears about becoming a donor recipient parent, and where are you at now in the present, and what are your thoughts about the future?
Yeah, I think probably went through the whole cycle of very normal, common, fears that most guys probably do in that situation, which is, some that David just touched on. Am I the lesser than option? Will I have this? I think probably the number one question that I've had over the last 6 years it's almost been since I've kind of run my Instagram platform. The most common question is, fears around bonding and, what if I don't connect with my kid? What if I don't feel like they're a real parent? What if they don't, like me? And I had those too. I think I would be more worried about you if you didn't have that fear, to be honest. I think it's how could you not worry about that, at least a little bit. And David kind of touched on something too that took me back to one of those. I mentioned those families that we met that were, a little bit ahead of us in this whole process. And I asked the dad of a donor conceived child at that time when we were still debating on what to do. I said, do you feel like less of a dad, with your kid? And he said, I worried about the same thing. And he said, I will tell you that at 2:00 in the morning when that kid's crying and I'm the one going across the house 100 times to, feed him and change his diaper and rock him back to sleep and comfort him. Who else is his dad in that moment, and that's what makes me his dad. That's what makes me his parent. And so that has stuck with me for a long, long time. And I can remember, I think I wrote a post about it at one point because I had one of those nights, and I remember it hit me, that phrase that he had used came back to me in the middle of the night while I was rocking my own daughter, back to sleep. And I had that same thought of, man, all those, like, not that they go away, but in the day-to-day of being a parent, those fears and concerns just gradually kind of go away because this bond grows and the relationship between you and that kid grows over time. And so it's kind of it's a weird thing when it does come back and you think about those insecurities or those questions you might have had before. But I had that, same thought in the middle of the night where I was like, of course I'm her dad. Who else is here doing this in the middle of the night for her and would do, anything for her. So I think that that kind of was a gradual, shift for me too. And just meeting her changed my whole life, in an instant too. And my feelings towards her and a lot of those fears washed away then. But that doesn't mean that they're, gone entirely. I do feel, so the way that our our arrangement is here. We have an open ID donor, meaning that when Delaney turns 18, she can reach out to the sperm bank if she wants, and she can contact him. We've actually connected with several of her donor siblings, and so we know of at least a couple that are older than her, and so it's possible that we could even, have that information prior to her turning 18. It's easy for me to say now that I feel, okay about that. I feel established in my relationship with Delaney and secure in my role as her dad. But like I said, it's easy for me to say that now, knowing that it's, 13 years off. I'll probably feel like throwing up a little bit when we get a little closer to that day. And, those conversations, if those conversations come back up at that point, much like David, if she says that that's what she wants, then I'll do whatever I have to do to help her, because to be honest, I'm a curious person, and I know I tried to put myself in her shoes, and I know that I would want to know. I think something that's kind of stuck with me, one of the greatest gifts probably that I have received through this whole experience for myself and maybe for Delaney too, is this the ability and opportunity that I've had to meet with lots of different donor conceived people over the last several years. And so to be able to kind of, no two people are the same, and I'm not going to lump them all together, but just to be able to have a little bit of that crystal ball experience, to be able to kind of reach into the future and ask questions of somebody who's been down this exact, road as a child born through sperm donation. And so I've been able to kind of ask some of those questions and hear what lots of different people's thoughts on it are. And, I know there's a chance she might want to do that. It will scare me when the time comes, I think that, kind of what I've been told by a lot of my favorite donor conceived people that I still get to kind of have an internet relationship with and kind of keep that conversation going, is it's a lot like, I don't know, as a parent to only one child, but maybe Sean, you can speak to it. They kind of say like, it's just like when you have another kid, doesn't mean all of a sudden that all that love that you had for one is replaced, by the new one or anything like that. It just kind of, your heart and your life kind of make room for multiple relationships that are not exactly the same. And, I kind of hold on to that hope a little bit that I will always be her dad. I'll always be, the man that made all these decisions for her. I'll always be the man that raised her and did all those middle of the night things that I spoke to earlier. There is someone else out there that contributed 50% of her DNA, and I will never have been that person. And I just kind of have to hold on to that hope that, the nurture, the relationship side of things is solid, and that, and I think probably, one of the best things I can do for her as her dad is to say, I'm willing to do that for you. And maybe even to say, it might hurt me a little bit. It might be weird for me or hard for me, but I will do that for you because I love you and I want, what's best for you. And if this is what you want. So I know we're kind of a long way off from it, but yeah, that's how I feel about it today. You don't have to ask me again, 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? I've said it before, you kind of live in here and now, and you have an eye on the future and what it could look like. We don't know. I am fully expecting those teenage rage years, especially because my daughter has completely inherited my wife's temper. So, and I know from my father-in-law what the teenage years were like for him. So, anticipating that that's going to come my way, it may happen that the comment is made about you're not my real dad, but the way I can I'm like, right, okay, it could happen. Like I have foresight about that. How do I deal with it at the time when it happens? It's because there's probably, there's going to be a bad moment if that's happening. But the way I kind of get over that now in my head is thinking of the tens of millions of teenagers worldwide who have said to their biological father in a fit of rage, I wish you weren't my real dad. And then I'd like to hope that when things calm down and settle down, that's usually repaired with a hug and an apology. So yeah, we live in, this is a complex route. These things could happen. And like you said, Alex, you know, now I feel rock solid in the fact that I leave it all out there. I am going all in with this parenting thing. I am 100% in with this love. I think at least I know I've done that. I haven't, there's nothing I've held back. But yeah, ask me that question in 15 years time or so, or not even that, 12 years time or so. And then, yeah, yeah, I might, like you said, it's perfectly something else. I could be feeling a little bit different, a bit sick, but yeah, it's a complex route, but one that there are many people going through, and that's the importance of doing this. And Marc, before I kind of round this off and come to the questions, your fears prior and where you're at now, and your thoughts on the future around seeking out the donor.
So I realised we've overrun a bit, so I'll keep it relatively short. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear prior to our son being born. If I think it's hard to think back because now I don't actually remember it. I've started to forget the fears and anxieties that I had because when he was born, it literally all fizzled out. I remember feeling really, really anxious about, is he going to see me as his dad? Am I going to form a connection? Am I going to be good enough? Etc. 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 When he was born and after he was born, like this child exists. He is my responsibility. That took over. It no longer mattered. Any of those anxieties didn't matter anymore. Right now, I am dad, and I feel confident as dad. And one day he may or may not choose to find his donor, and I will happily go with him to Denmark because that's where our bank is, and see some sights and enable him to meet the donor and be positive about it because that's what he needs. I think at a point in time I felt strange about it, and scared about the prospect. But to be honest, right now, and it may be a combination of what I've done in therapy. It could be a combination of speaking to people in the DCN and different experiences, different resources. But I currently don't have that fear. So yeah. With regards to, with regards to being dad, I meet lots of Janets in my path. My wife works a lot with community, and I get so many people come up to me and say, "He has your eyes, he has your mouth." Someone said to me the other day, "He's the perfect mix of the two of you." I've just realised that people say shit because they don't really know what to say, or they think it's what people say. And about probably 99% of the time, they're not looking for a conversation. They're just trying to say something nice. So I also went through a period of like, oh, should I just turn around and say, well, did you know he's actually donor conceived, and let me educate you on that? But actually, that's not where my energy should go. So typically I just nod and smile and say thank you because, okay, he's a perfect mix of us. Great. Oh, you think he has my eyes? If anything, that's a fantastic compliment. The fact that he doesn't even have my genetics, yet he has my eyes, that's fantastic. I'll take it. Yeah, I guess I've done a lot to turn this as positive as I can. To a point where I feel like I have truly accepted and kind of don't have the fears anymore. And a lot of that is if I was speaking to myself before my son was born, I wouldn't believe me. There is absolutely nothing that me before he was born could have been told or said in any community group anywhere that would have pushed my fears and anxieties. Him being born has enabled me to become the dad I am now, and I'll leave it there because I know we're overrunning.
That's quite incredible. It reminded me of something that Alex said, and Alex, I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but I saw someone post it the other day, and it said, "If I knew what was on the other side, I wouldn't have made the decision beforehand so hard." Have I got that roughly right?
Yeah, Becky, Defining Mom, I think she shared it the other day, just saying the hardest decision of our lives would have been the easiest if we knew, what was waiting for us on the other side. And that's just kind of, that's really how I feel. And like Marc said, I'm not sure I could have eased all my past self fears or insecurities or anything. But I think that's something that I wish I could go back and tell myself is I know this is the hardest, decision that you've probably had to make up to this point. It will, like, what's waiting for you on the other side. You can breathe a little bit easier knowing that that it's all going to be okay. Just can't go back and tell myself that like I wish I could.
Yeah, very true. Alex, I'll stick with you because you touched upon this earlier. It's a question that came in about feelings on donor siblings. And I know you said you've already had a little bit of contact or certainly know of some.
Yeah. So the way that our bank is set up, we have a donor sibling registry through the sperm bank. And so once we reported our daughter as being born, they gave us kind of access to meet some of those people. And then what I did was I actually created a Facebook page specific to our donor, because it's a lot more user friendly than what the sperm bank was providing. And so, to be honest, I'm the one that did it, and I still don't really know how I feel about it. It's one of those things that I am curious about, and I know that if I were Delaney, I would be curious about that. We have explained to her that the donor that helped us to have her has also helped other families to have their babies as well. And so in that way have kind of started to explain that that there are donor siblings out there. I think the kind of the unique issue there is that it's not entirely up to us. There's other, families involved there that would need to, consent to want to, meet or share things about our lives or whatever. So for now, what we have, and also the oldest of the babies were all kind of born right before COVID. Delaney born right at the onset, and so getting together has never really been an option or in the early on days, and it just kind of hasn't really come up since then either in that group. And so it's kind of just become a place that we share, pictures and updates on our kids. And it's interesting to see, oh, so-and-so is very good at this or very interested in this topic, or is very, has anybody noticed? It's also a good place to share medical information. Has anybody's kid been allergic to strawberries or, whatever? It's kind of been an interesting way to have those kinds of interactions. We've not gone about meeting any of them just yet. I don't know what that'll look like for us in the future. But we'll see.
I don't know if anyone else has any opinion about donor siblings and any kind of contacting or anything like that, or building a relationship. Marc.
I very quickly kind of just give my thoughts on this. I think the prospect of donor siblings initially feels like it could be overwhelming, but I guess from my perspective, we're raising a child who is going to have this story that's going to be different from his peers, and we will do our best to support him and such. But the fact that he could potentially have a community out there, essentially, that he can relate to in a way that he won't be able to with us, from my perspective, is a bonus, and that's kind of the spin I'm currently putting on it. Like if the donor siblings aren't people that he gets on with, if the other families aren't ones that like if like all the bits that might not work, if that comes to pass, then we'll deal with it at the time, and we'll approach it as best we can. But if he could be in a position where he has contacts who are donor siblings or such, from my perspective, that's lovely.
Yeah. David, this question may be something that you may have touched on a little bit earlier. I wonder apologies if I'm putting you on the spot with it, but it was in the chat earlier about one of the guys has only been given 2 options of donors, and neither of them match the desired characteristics that they would like. How would you cope with that element of choosing a donor? And the reason I'm thinking about you here is about what you mentioned with your first choice, but that you couldn't use because of the fact that you didn't have a test that wasn't compatible with something that you needed. So I don't know if that's something that you might be able to give a thought on.
Exactly the same as what Alex was saying. The wonder of having come out the other side, there's so much of it is nurture based that I think in the moment the sperm seems like the be all and end all decision that you've got to make, and that's going to shape you up, that the child that you have forever and all of that, when actually it boils down to, and it's not really something you can read on a profile, will they be a nice person, will they be a loving person, will I love them? And if you can kind of answer all 3 of those yes, then maybe it doesn't necessarily I'm not saying the sperm doesn't matter, because it really does, but at the same time, if you've only got 2 options, it's finding that connection to you and but at the end of the day, there will be a lot of nurture that kind of forms that person and who they are. However, I think at the time, if we as a couple were only given 2 options, we would have been quite vocal about wanting to know why that's the case, and knowing that there are options out there, that we would have potentially explored other options if we felt that strongly. But it's really hard, because it does feel like the hardest decision you will ever make in your life. But I don't really consider the donor, apart from the fact that my wife now works in fertility. I think if she didn't, we wouldn't necessarily. It wouldn't be the thing that was at the fore for most of our days. Like, so it's a hard thing to say, because having made a decision and then having it taken away from you, like we kind of had, wasn't nice at all. Like, it was a horrible feeling to feel that someone else was kind of playing God with my child. And I feel that's a hard thing to kind of get around. But I think also, if you're that strongly opposed to it, it's exploring if there are other options. And I know for some people there might not be, and some people it might be like the last thing they want to do is have to restart with a new whatever or anything. Also looking at the donors, finding things that are beyond the I'm 6'2", I've got blonde hair, blue eyes, that sort of thing. Like I said, for me, it was passion. And to be honest, I wouldn't have cared what it was as long as I saw passion. So boiling down, like, try and boil it down and boil it down and boil it down until you find what the core element of what you're looking for is. It doesn't have to be they love the same thing as you, or they've got the same X or Y as you, or anything like that. It might just be that there is something there. Because the fact that, I mean, Magdalene is the most passionate person I've ever met about the stupidest of things, but she's still super passionate about it. And that was what mattered to me. And so I think if you can boil it down to just that, almost key words, you might then look at those donors in a different way and see that actually donor A might actually really love that thing that you've never even heard of before, but they really love it, which means they're in a position where they can be that wholeheartedly passionate about something, which then is something that you can kind of cling to. But it's really hard. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah, it is. To give my take on that, we were really drawn to some of the donors that that had these pen pictures about who they were, what their personality is, because it humanizes them, and they were very warm profiles. They were doing it because they had been through fertility struggles themselves, and their wife needed donor eggs. So they, a bit like what you said, David, they wanted to give back from their side, and we were drawn to them. And it's like, oh, they're such lovely people. But in the end, we went for a profile that was blank. It had the mandatory information that you have to give, the kind of biometric stuff like height, weight, eye color, etc., and medical history. But we knew nothing about them, and that was what attracted us to them in the end, because we didn't want to have any expectation. We wanted our child or children to be who they were, and for us to help that flourish in whatever way that is, and try and make anything that they have an interest in to open those doors as much as we can, and just allow them to take their own path, and not be thinking, oh, well, the donor was this or that. And I'm not sure if that specifically answers the question, but hopefully it helps in some way. Yeah, I will. I'm very conscious that it's 90 minutes plus, so I'll try and wrap up. I think that there's a question there as well. It's potentially a good way for us all to end with final thoughts, really, because we've all been there, we've all been through this. So, how did you or your partner feel about sharing their genetics with a stranger? I can throw that open to everyone, and if you want to use it as a way of kind of rounding off your thoughts and feelings about becoming a donor recipient parent in general, then by all means. I don't know if there's anyone who wants to take that one first.
I'll go. I'm unmuted. For me, it was, I think by the time we were getting to the point where we were choosing a sperm donor, it was more about creating a family than creating a baby, as I said earlier. So for us, it was just the next step. And I can't talk for my wife, obviously, but for me, it was just, it's obviously not what anyone wants. But for me, it was our only option. So it was the way it was going to happen. And if it didn't happen that way, there'd be another way that we'd explore. And it was just that mentality of, we wanted that family for so long, and that image of what was the dream wasn't holding a little baby that had my genetics. It was holding a little baby that was mine, regardless of its genetics, all the way through to, I don't know, playing football with them in the park and teaching them how to ride a bike, all the way through to watching them graduate, if that was the way that we wanted to go. And that became far more important than the science behind it all, and the infertility did. I think that we kind of used that sort of ethos and emotion to kind of not suppress, but kind of get past the fact that the genetics that would be shared wouldn't be mine and all of that sort of stuff. It became our only option. And that was it for us. It was never a no. It was just this is the option that's going to give us what we want, and what we wanted was a family.
Thank you. And Marc, do you have any thoughts on that?
That resonates entirely with me. I echo exactly what you said, and it very much is. It's creating a family, not a baby. I would say that again, at the point we were at, it's about how we get through the process to create that family. It's not about my wife sharing genetics with a stranger. It's not like it's more the child may have the genetics of the stranger, but it's not like my wife and the stranger coming together to create that baby. It's not. I'm not sure that quite makes sense, but I think my wife and I have never at any point thought of it in that way, but I completely understand why that would be something that is thought about and is difficult to come to terms with. My perspective is that the donor has enabled me to have a family. I am grateful to the donor for his decisions in life that have meant that I am able to have the family that I have now. And the strangest part of all of it is that we went through 4.5 years of trauma. Like, even when we started IVF, we had miscarriage, we had failed rounds, we had etc. etc. Like, so much trauma, but at the same time, because all of that led us to having the baby that we have now and the family we have now, I wouldn't change it. It's made me into a better dad. It's made me into. I mean, honestly, I look at some of my dad friends, and I just think, like, I wanted this so badly and went through experiences that kind of made me realize how much I wanted this, and that means I am a better dad each day. And I guess my goal, to some extent, is, like, we're going to be open with him as he grows up. When people around us find out that, if they find out, because they might not, but if they find out that he's donor conceived, I want them to say, "Oh, based on how you are with him, never would have thought that," type of thing. So that's kind of the driver for me. To turn into kind of a wrapping up statement, the things that I guess the things that I would say to people listening are, first of all, the love that I have for my son is unconditional, and I wish I'd known that was going to be the case, and it's regardless of whose DNA he has. The other thing is, I would just say to everyone, just be kinder to yourself. It's too easy to blame yourself, to blame others, to blame, like, there doesn't have to be blame. Like, be kinder to yourself, find moments of joy to share with your wife or partner. Speak to people where you feel comfortable to. Don't feel pressure to keep everyone in kind of, something's happened, oh, I need to tell everyone along the way. We were in that position at one point. It's exhausting. Managing what other people know and their reactions is exhausting. So yeah, be kinder to yourself, be kinder to yourselves, plural, and just, like, find the way that works for you to process what you're going through, whether that's journaling, whether that's therapy, whether it's speaking to your mates at the pub, like, whatever it is. And just make sure that you have something, because if you keep it all inside, it is completely overwhelming.
Thank you. That was really powerful. Thank you. And Alex, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think to kind of answer that question that you asked about, how do you feel about your partner kind of sharing genetics with a stranger, or how do they feel about it? I think what we, as the panel, and Sean included, the benefit that we have is kind of the knowledge of what the future holds, potentially for all of you guys who are still kind of in that, in those early stages, and just like I had with those families that we knew, and kind of like it was a glimpse into the future. There's nothing probably that we can say to kind of clear up, all of your fears and concerns and doubts and all of those things. It's like all of those are incredibly normal. I think there's a lot of things like that question that, again, I can't take that off of you, except to say that, especially now, that's just not something that I'm thinking about on a day-to-day basis. When I look at my wife, when I look at my kid, I see, my kid, and she is who she is, and I wouldn't. And that's not to say that it wasn't hard and even, a bit weird, even up to the day that we were doing our IUIs that led to our daughter. My wife and I came home and it felt weird. We were like, what did we just do? It's just a weird experience. It's not, how we pictured it, that it was going to be originally when we started trying to grow our family. And so the whole thing is just different, and it's impossible to tell yourself in that moment that, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out this way. I didn't have those feelings necessarily about kind of my wife sharing genetics with a stranger. I think she had those feelings more than me. I think she was worried that I was going to feel some kind of way, that I was going to feel like she had done something wrong, or it wasn't how we thought it was all going to look, and we just kind of had to grieve that process in many ways to get to where we are. And I think there will be those moments, there will be those doubts and those fears across many areas along the way. But I know, like, the one thing that I can say from where I sit now is that despite all of the trials and all the hard days and all the weird moments and all the doubts, I would not, if I could go back, I would not make any decision other than the exact one that leads me to exactly where we are right now with the exact kid that we have. There's just I don't want that life, even if it means a biological child at this point. If I could go back and blink my eyes and have that now, that's not the choice I would make. And I'm incredibly lucky and grateful to be able to say that, sitting in this position. But I hope that at least gives, a tiny bit of comfort or hope or something, that what you're feeling is not only incredibly normal, but, in my situation, at least, has kind of completely gone away.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. And yeah, just to give my one-line take on it, I was thinking it during you guys, like what you're saying. We're all here, and we choose to speak about it. I don't know. I'll never know, because I've chosen to talk about this virtually every day. If I wasn't talking about this every day, I genuinely don't think that I would think about it. It's just because I'm choosing to put myself back in the space, if you know what I mean, to help others. And yeah, it's just not. It wouldn't be a thought on my mind. And when you're in the moment with the kids, it's never something you think about. It's pure. It is love, and that's all I can say from the other side. Really, is just take the advice of the guys that are living it, and like Alex said, it's completely natural. But yeah, that was everything that I hoped it would be and more. It was incredible, and I hope everyone here that's listening and everyone that will watch in due course, I hope it gives you that that comfort and warmth to know that everything that you're thinking and feeling, we've all been through it, and we've got through it, and we're on the other side. And it's important to acknowledge that it doesn't stop. We are living in it now. We have the future, which we just don't know about. But yeah, we're all in this together, and this is what the community is for. If anyone's got any more questions or just want to start a conversation about something that's on their mind, that's what the chat's for. So please do lean into that, and we're all here for you. So guys, everyone that's here, thank you so much. Everyone that's come, thank you so much for your time this evening. And yeah, it's been great. So thank you, everyone.